much for having me. Thank you, Jasmine, for organizing this. So it was a while ago that I worked at the World Economic Forum. So if any of you have recently read up on anything and are like, this is wrong, feel free to tell me, or you just know that, you know, it's been a few years that I worked there. So my name is Paola, and I'm Swedish, but I grew up abroad, and I've always been interested in sort of international affairs. And I've worked as an economist and a journalist, and then through my, throughout my sort of working life, I've always been interested in, like, wanted to do something good, but also believing that you can't do something good alone. You need to work together, and I guess you need a private sector a lot. So I've been in the private sector quite a bit, but I have a bit of an issue with, private sector is all good, but, just making money, I like it when there's a bigger goal. And I've been a bit in the not-for-profit sector where it's very much, it's very humanitarian and very driven to doing good things, and it's fantastic, but sometimes it's hard to do that on your own. So I'm a big believer that you need to work together. And that's, I guess, how I ended up working at the World Economic Forum, because I was looking for a place where you bring private, not-for-profit, government, where can you bring it all together? And this is one of the places that does this, or claims to do this. We can discuss that later, because there's a lot of pros and cons, and there's a lot of arguments back and forth, and we can really talk about, are they doing more good than bad, or more bad than good? Who knows? But their aim, the statement of purpose of the World Economic Forum is to improve the state of the world, which is a very big, lofty goal. And, do they do that? I think everyone has to draw their own conclusion. But I just wanted to show you a tiny introduction video, just because it gives a little bit of an idea what the World Economic Forum is about. It's a not-for-profit organization that does a lot of things. It's most famous for its Davos yearly annual meeting, which is the big meeting in Switzerland once a year in January. And they also do, they do loads of meetings all around the world, all year round. They do a lot of other things as well. But this will just give you an idea, a feeling for what the meeting is like. And then after that, I'll talk a bit, but feel free to jump in with questions, because I'd like to be an interactive. We're also so few here that, give an interactive conversation, and to make sure that I don't go on and on about something that's really not interesting for any of you, So just stop me and say, look, can you talk about something else, because it's not that interesting. That's fine. So just a little.
We recognize that the world is changing at an incredible pace. What the World Economic Forum does is bring together leaders from all different backgrounds, from all different walks of life. And that provides a unique space for new ideas and new solutions to flourish.
It is really a very unique place. It's a place where industry comes together to work with government, to work with NGOs, academics, to truly make a difference in the world.
Leaders come together because of their own personal commitment to one another, to see follow-up to the discussions that they had at our meetings.
I'm generally really skeptical about panels and debates and presentations and whatnot, but I've actually been shocked to discover in the last year that it makes a huge difference.
The present challenges in a complex, interconnected, fast-moving world cannot be met by one stakeholder group alone. It needs collaborative efforts.
Magic moments happen all the time at the World Economic Forum, where the right kind of constituent unexpectedly will come together with somebody else who's looking for exactly that expertise.
Not only do the multi-stakeholder groups that we bring together talk, they also make changes.
A lot of the answers reside with practitioners, civil society voices, social entrepreneurs, young people, and others who are on the ground working with these populations at the front lines and finding solutions.
It challenges all your assumptions about your existing worldview, regardless of which part of the world you're from and how much experience you have.
Nowhere in the world is there another forum which brings together governments, NGOs, corporate leaders, activists, artists, musicians, to all come together and talk about the biggest issues facing the world.
In global challenges, very often there is no right answer. There is a best answer. That best solution only comes from engaging a diversity of stakeholders.
That's it. Very short, but it gives a bit of an overview, right? Just a bit of a feeling. So, what is? I'll just start by saying just two words. So Davos is what it's famous for, right? So Davos is a meeting, as I said, happens every year. It's 2,500 people come to Davos. About half of them are business leaders, and these are the people who pay to come to Davos. The other half are not business leaders, and they basically come for free. So in a way, you could call that business subsidizes everybody else coming there. So of those, the other half that's not business leaders, it's government officials, so about 40 to 60 heads of state, and then the rest other positions, like finance ministers or whatever ministers. Then it's about 200 what they call media leaders, so owners of the media or special journalists particularly invited to be part of the meeting. Then there's like 500 other journalists outside the meeting that can sort of cover from, access a few things, but not everything. And then there's about 200 academics, so probably what is seen as the best academics in the world in all areas, from finance to political science to literature to whatever. And then there's what they call young global leaders, so young people who've done amazing things already. Technology pioneers, so they try to catch the founders of places like Google and Facebook before they're big and famous. And then they have a new thing, they have young, what they call global shapers, even younger people in their 20s who've done something great. And then they have religious leaders from all areas of religion. And then they have labor organization representatives. So it's really a mix. And I think that's, initially the forum was started in 1971 as a business management forum for Europeans to learn what the Americans were doing better and right in terms of management that the Europeans know. And then it grew from that to something much bigger. And I would say the World Economic Forum's biggest asset is that the founder, Klaus Schwab, who is probably 77 or something by now, is very good at sort of feeling where is the wind blowing and where should we be going next. And I think that's one of the reasons it stayed relevant so far, because everybody keeps saying it's outdated, but they're very good at so in the 90s when there were some big protests, anti-globalization protests, what did they do? Well, they decided, okay, we'll invite not maybe the protester, but we'll invite the more social people in. So let's bring in the labor leaders, let's bring in the other leaders, and let's make them part of the conversation. Then you can always say that, if they were too difficult, they might not invite them 2 years in a row. But they did invite them in. And when tech became a big thing, they started including tech firms. And so they've been very good at feeling their way in terms of who they should include. So it makes for a very interesting meeting because it's a bit of everything. So just as a fun fact, so 2,500 people show up there, 8,500 police are on call, are surrounding. To be honest, you barely see them. They're standing on some roofs and they're a bit all over. But I might have seen 15 or 20. But there's 8,500 all in all. So it becomes a pretty big thing. And this is largely sponsored by the Swiss state, who somehow thinks that it's worth having all these people come to Switzerland, and so pays. The WEF helps out, but pays for this because otherwise, if the WEF had to pay for what the Swiss government does during these days, it wouldn't be possible. They also closed down the airspace above that whole area, so all the flight traffic that usually flies there to land in Zurich is redirected for 5 days. And they have these are just funny anecdotes, and they have their own military aircrafts circle twice a day. So it's a pretty big thing, and about 1,000 planes, which doesn't really make sense because there's only 2,500 people, but it does about 1,000 private jets land at Zurich Airport that week, and I don't know how many hundreds of helicopters come up. And you could definitely start talking about climate change. I mean, they all pay off, to be carbon neutral and all that. But it's a big thing. Although you don't really feel it when you're there. So that's that. And these are the 2,500 people who have a badge that are allowed to walk into the big Congress Center where all the meetings take place. Outside of that, Davos is not, of all the ski towns in Switzerland, this is really not the most beautiful one. But they have some bigger hotels than most, and they're building some more hotels, and that's why it was located there, because it was a place where they wanted to be on a mountaintop, but they needed to have hotels and access, right? So outside of that, there are all the hangers-on of Davos. So any of us can just go and hang in the hotels, lobbies, and bars, and just hope to meet, these interesting people. So there's a lot of hanger-oners that are just like hanging there, like to get a glimpse of whoever is there. And actually you do. I mean, when I was working there, obviously I had access as I was working there, but we would go to have a drink sometimes after work at night, and various times, you'd be standing this close to Richard Branson or something. So Yes, you did ask, but it's not like, you're going to run up and like, hi, what I mean. But you do, so a lot of people come and think they're going to do a lot of business just in the corridors and the streets and all that, which is doable. I mean, you just have to be a very good networker and you get some tips. And they're making it harder and harder every year to get in to all the places. And and I think a lot of the fun also happens at night. So this is really literally a business meeting and a party meeting, because nobody goes to bed before like 4 a.m. There are big parties at night, and oftentimes that's when a lot of people who've been there would say that's when a lot of interesting things happen. That's when you end up sitting next to somebody who's like, yeah, we're going to start this new thing and we need some CEO and what's your background and blah, blah. And that's where some of the fun, unexpected things can happen. And it's McKinsey has a big party with a live band that goes on for like, 10 hours or something. That's popular. And then Google has their own big party, and Salesforce has their big thing. And then each government, and India has their Indian night. And I mean, it's like non-stop. It's exhausting. I mean, I worked there, so there wasn't a lot of partying for me, but they were 20-hour days. I mean, it depends what job you have, but they were 20-hour days generally. But that's for that period of time. I mean, the offices are located in Geneva, right? So before Davos, everything is moved up to Davos for 10 days, and everything happens there. Computers, information systems, everything. And then everything is moved down from the mountaintop. So what happens inside, the World Economic Forum itself, and I was part of that team, organizes about 250 panels and workshops. So it's over like 4.5 days. So official workshops and official panels where, it's everything from business, economics, culture, arts, science, technology, everything. Those are the official panels. Then the World Economic Forum also sets up about maybe 1,000 other meetings, smaller meetings within Davos that they are aware of and organize, so those can be industry meetings. So for example, all the people who work in the mining industry will meet, or all the people who work in the media industry will meet, or all the people working in this industry will meet, or all the people interested in a certain aspect of climate change will meet. So there's like every meeting you can imagine. That's organized by the WEF itself. And then you have all the private meetings. So if you are working for an organization and you want to do your own event and you want to have your own meetings, you can organize that and book a room maybe in one of the hotels and things like that and have your own. So, I think there's at least 10,000 meetings going on during these days. I mean, it's crazy. And the people who are very used to it, so people go for different reasons. I mean, a lot of them go just to do business. That has to be clear, even though the WEF wants, to improve the state of the world. And those people some of those people they just want to do business, and what they literally do is they rent what they call a room, but basically any normal other time of the year it's closet. And a closet, it costs about $15,000 or Swiss francs to rent that per day, and they have 2 chairs in there, and then they have back-to-back meetings every half an hour for 4 days. And so they see all the different CEOs, maybe, heads of states are a bit hard, you might have to meet them outside. And people have been quoted coming on there saying, for me it was great, I did a third of my yearly business in these 4.5 days, because they had back-to-back meetings every half an hour. And then, so a lot of big companies, Nestle or whatever, around the time of Davos, they literally might have 3 people working full-time just to set up their schedule, just to set up who they're going to meet. And if you're like an important person, I mean, I think Klaus Schwab, the founder, I think he got like, what year I was there, 400 invitations just to attend a little meeting or a little drink or something, so if you're maximizing what you're doing at Davos, you have a whole team behind you who maximizes. This is what some people do. Then you have other CEOs who just come and say, this is my time of the year to see new ideas where I don't constantly have to be thinking about my business. I don't want to go to any of these meetings. I don't want to hear more about whatever it is I work with. I want to be inspired. So they go to, panels organized by the World Economic Forum of like, what's the latest going on in technology? Because the WEF is very good at attracting, the new people that not everybody has already heard about. Or they go, there's some artists, they want to go hear about the art, or they want to go hear about, the latest in medicine. So there is that. So they're like, this is my time to be inspired and to find different things, to do different things. So people go with different intentions. And I guess with, what I think the WEF, or at least my aim when I was working there, was to try and touch as many people as possible with this idea that don't forget to do things in the good way or right, where you can maybe improve to do this more environmentally friendly or more humanitarian or more, that was, so you want to try to expose them. Of course, if somebody's renting a closet and they're sitting there all day, it's not that easy to access them, right? But you try in different ways to get to at least, it's hard to be there without at least hearing about, what? It's really important with, whatever it is, climate change or this or that. And there's so many big speeches about it, and everybody does show up for a few big speeches, that it's hard not to hear what is going on and what's important. And there is like a big promotion of the important issues, but obviously you can't force people to be in the room to really hear about it. But it also happens that, you meet people and they talk about it, and there are quite a few even CEOs who are really trying to do the right thing, and and they try to influence everybody else, and so yeah, you can't get to everybody, and you just have to see who you could possibly get to, and a lot of and the world usually gets criticized for it's just a talk shop. What did they actually do? There's like nothing is coming out of this. It's just a big talk shop, and that's one of the reasons why the Clinton Global Initiative was set up by Bill and Hillary Clinton in 2005 was because they're like, we want to be the antithesis to Davos, where everybody goes and talks. We want to be the place where people go, and decide they're going to do something. So the whole idea was that the Clinton Global Initiative was that every idea was to be matched with a funding partner or something to make something happen. I'm not sure how well it has worked out for them. Yes, there is some matching and it's still happening, but it's really hard when you have that many people and so many interactions to then follow, because when people are there, they're so excited. I cannot even begin to describe to you the adrenaline and the energies in these rooms. I mean, you're on a high. Whether you like it or not, you're on a high. It's like constant high. And people get so excited, and I've done quite a few workshops there where we're like, okay, so we're doing something, and that's very meaningful, and it's like, who wants to continue working on this the rest of the year? And everybody's like, yeah, me, I'm gonna, we're gonna do it, and let's continue, and then you try to follow up, and on the first email, everybody's like, go, 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 and then like a month later, everybody's back in their own, day to day, and it's really, really hard. It's really, really hard. So I don't even know if you can do, how much you can do out of it. Having said that, there are so many things that happen that we would never know about. So when I first started working there, I was working with all the business, I was in charge of all the political, economic, and business discussions in Davos. And I got a bit bored because I'm a former journalist, so I wanted to say really interesting stuff. And of course, they want to just do their marketing a little bit, we're the best. So that wasn't that much fun. And so I started working with other more creative people, and I tried to, the idea for me was to get new ideas into Davos, and I, worked with a lot of architects and designers and cultural leaders, so people in the cultural field, in authors and stuff like that, and tried to bring in their thinking into, how to look at, world issues, right, and business issues and everything. And so that was great, but even me, with those people I was working with, I'm like, how do I even value if something came out of this? You can't. But little anecdotes when you follow up with people. So one of the people I work very closely with, she's she's quite a famous architect in New York, and she was head of the School of Architecture and Design at Harvard University. And so she came and we did some workshops about, seeing the world in, three-dimensionally and how you could solve problems. Because sometimes seeing something two-dimensionally is not the same as three-dimensionally. So you think you're solving a problem by just, linking things like this, but it doesn't really work that way in real life. And a little thing like that, just having an architect working with business people to look at things three-dimensionally can totally change how you view a problem. It did, just in a 2-hour session. So anyway, anecdote, but these fun things happen that can seem so simple. But for example, so after she left, we followed up, I worked quite a lot with her, and I was like, so what do you think? No, because initially all these people, like the authors and the architects, like, WEF? I'm not interested. I don't care, like that stupid elite, all these rich people, I don't want to go there. There's all that. So that was a bit of everybody else like, oh, we're dying to go to Davos. But they were a bit hard to get there. But then you're like, well, do you want to stay there on the outside, or do you want to come in and see maybe you can influence these people to maybe think a bit differently? So a lot of them do come to see, if they can. But so I asked her after, so what did you get anything out of the web? This is years ago, right? She's like, yeah, no, it's fun and this and that. And she ran around to all these other sessions, and she said, yeah, so I think we need to be much more sustainable in how we build things and how we design things. So she went home and she changed the entire curriculum for the design and architecture schools at Harvard. Now, how do you value that? Almost impossible. But would that have an impact? Of course. 10, 15 years down the line. But I wouldn't even known about this if I wasn't quite close to her and was following up, because, you know, it's hard to capture all this information. And it's hard to evaluate this. But yeah, of course that's going to be a big thing, you know? And that she went back and changed our curriculum and started including all these sustainability people in teaching the program and stuff. So just as a little example. So that's Davos and the whole meeting, I think. And then they have regional meetings, so every year they do this, you know, the big Davos meeting, which is totally global, and then they do a regional meeting, you know, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in China, in Japan, in South America, in Europe, and then they have more smaller meetings all over the world. So that's the main thing, what they're known for. But what they're going more in the direction, I think, of trying to become a more think tank and create content. And I think that was part of when I started working there. We were the first year a group of what they called Global Leadership Fellows to come and work there. So it was like you worked there for 3 years, and you also get a leadership education, which can also be discussed how good that is. But and so that was, and they continue with that. So they take in 30 people, 25 to 30 people every year that are very content driven, because all of us came with at least master degrees from top schools and 5 to 10 years work experience. And, you know, and before, because initially in the past, they hired a lot of people just from hotel management schools to organize conference, but it's not like that anymore at all. It's like now they hire, like, in many times, people who have too much experience maybe and have become become more content driven. So they give out very content-driven reports. So the one is the competitiveness report, which are the most competitive countries in the world. The WEF has always, when you read about that, you know, it always comes out every year, the most competitive countries. That's the WEF, and they've been doing that for a long time. And that's based on a lot of economic analysis, and a whole team of, you know, analysts sits and do that. They now expanded that, so they do the gender reports, they do sustainable city reports, they do a lot of things that are quite in-depth. And then on top of that, they have started working, they start working with a lot of experts in all fields. And I don't know, you probably see even on Facebook people, you know, put out World Economic Forum articles all the time. So those little articles, like one-pagers, about every single issue in the world pretty much, is branded World Economic Forum, where somebody at the WEF is sitting with a group of experts that they're in charge of, and asking them to, you know, write the latest up-to-date thing. And bam, it's published, right? So the WEF, you know, it's not that big of an organization. It has about 400 people working there, which when I came 10 years ago, there were 200. So it's grown a lot in the last 10 years, seeing that it's been, you know, it's been going for 45 years. But in the last few years, it grew a lot. And so they managed to get all these people to do this, and then they promote their names. So they're everywhere. I'm actually amazed at how often they're quoted. If you start looking, I'm amazed at how often they are quoted in the press. The World Economic Forum says, well, the World Economic Forum was never an expert at any of these things, you know? But they have amassed the experts, and the experts are willing to work with them, and now they are producing all these things. I mean, there's series reports, that's all in-house with the series teams of analysts. But all the other things, it's like... So I was going to say, so why... Feel free to stop me at any time. But why is the WEF still relevant? Because a lot of people say, you know, this thing is so outdated, and a lot of people go to Davos and say, you know, it's too expensive. Well, I think, all this, by the way, is personal opinion, right? I don't work here anymore. I don't represent them in any way, shape, or form. I think they still have the first mover's advantage. They were the first ones to start doing something this big. And it's become sort of well known. And even though some people are like, I don't want to go anymore, everybody keeps returning. So there is that. So it's still like the most relevant place if you want to meet a mix of people. You know, a lot of people say, well, TED is so much better. Well, TED is much better if you just want to hear brilliant ideas. Brilliant ideas, one after the other. But you sit very passively. I've been to TED. You sit passively, you listen, it's great. But you sit one after the other. And of course, in the breaks, you meet people. The difference with the WEF is that, you know, you have the heads of state, you have the politicians, you have such a mix, and they're all supposed to interact, and nobody's supposed to sit and listen the whole day. So you get a bit of mix, and there's no other conference in the world that has such a mix. isn't. You know, there's a lot of business conferences, or there's a lot of this, but you don't get all the politicians together with all the scientists, the top academics in the world, the top of everything. You just don't get that. And so it's just built on that. And as I said earlier, Klaus Schwab is very good at like, where's the wind blowing and where are we going next? So always try to stay a bit relevant. You know, I mean, so he's good at seeing that. They stay relevant that way. Now they're just actually last week open. So they have the main office in Geneva. They have an office in New York, only since a few years back, and China and Japan. And they just opened office last week in San Francisco. In their words, then to harness everything that's going on, you know, in the sort of Silicon Valley digital world, because, you know, they feel like whatever they call the fourth industrial revolution, this mix of digital, biological, all these things that are happening, and how are you going to harness all that change? And so the web also says, how can we make sure that whatever happens, that we can get help, you know, enhancing our biological, you know, whatever. For those of you who saw Skavlan on Friday, there was that Yuval guy who was talking about, you know, so all these type of issues, like, is it going to be a nation, is it going to be a world divided by rich and poor, where the rich can buy help to get smarter, stronger, you know, and the West is now saying, okay, we also need to take all this and make sure it doesn't only go to the rich. I have no clue if they really mean what they say, but, you know, so now they've started San Francisco office with, like, we have to make sure that everything we learn and do and have access to has to be for everybody. So they always have some sort of like, let's do the right thing, and then you can discuss if they do or not. So I think that's still why they stay relevant, because nobody else has managed to do what they're doing to bring that many together. And had they not been the first, I'm not sure they would have been better than anybody else. They were just the first, and people are now used to going there. And so for a company to be a member, basically you have to have at least a turnover of about $5 billion, and then you have to pay a membership fee, and there's various levels, but the highest level with all the big companies are called strategic partners, and you have to pay about $600,000 a year to be a member. And with that, you can bring 4 or 5 people to Davos, and they can't be anybody. It has to be like CEO, COO, CFO, you know, level. And each person there costs about another $25,000. So we're talking $600,000 per company, plus 5 times $25,000. So $725,000 to send 5 people to Davos. That's what it costs. And so some, of course, are saying, you know, a lot of companies who don't go, they're like, this is bullshit, and, you know, I'm not going to pay $700,000 to go to this conference. You know, that's ridiculous. It's just a talk show. And others will say, well, look, if I put an ad on TV for a minute, I'm paying $700,000. And here, I spend 4 days meeting leaders from all fields of the world and doing maybe 20% of my yearly business, or, you know, talking to that government official, or talking to this government about why is it so hard to do water sanitation in this country, or why are there such trade barriers over there. So, of course, you know, $700,000, do I take a 1-minute ad, or do I go to Davos? So you can really, you know, see in different ways. But this is, so the web, I mean, now it's expanded so much. And, you know, actually this membership fee 15 years ago used to be like $50,000 a year. So they've like upped it like crazy. You know, they went from 50, there's 600 is the top. And then there's what they call industry partners. They pay like 300, I think. And then they can always send 2 people or 3 people. And with that comes also the engagements into all the reports and the access to industry leaders. And, you know, they also meet during the year. So there's other things as well. But so for the CEOs, it's like Davos, and the rest is like, yeah, we leave it to other people to talk about, you know, the future of media or the future of sustainable development. But so the basis is that all these companies are paying, and, you know, and that's huge. And so the World Economic Forum is a not-for-profit, so nobody's making any big amount of money. But of course, with that sort of, you know, money coming in, money is non-issue. I mean, now, as I said, they've expanded so much, opening offices in New York and Beijing and Tokyo and now San Francisco, and you know, so they're using a lot of money, so maybe they're plus minus zero. And they were struggling for years when they started, right? Because it was just a conference, let's bring Europeans to learn about American management techniques. But now, so when they're not expanding, I mean, that's a lot of money coming in. There's 1,000 companies that are members, but, you know, about 150 of those pay maybe $600,000 a year, and then, you know, I don't know, 200 pay $300,000 a year. But, you know, and then everybody who comes, nobody's paid for anything. So I was going to say, all these reports, all these experts that are asked for help, nobody's paid. It has that much of a reputation that people are willing to do it for free. And I know when I was there, you know, I mean, people like Tony Blair and Clinton or whatever, they take $100,000 or $200,000 per speech. Not in Davos. Nobody gets paid. And I think that's fine for somebody like Clinton or Blair not to be paid. The problem is you're inviting, I mean, I invited some mountaineering guy, a blind mountaineer, who's like, well, I need to be paid $20,000 because, you know, this is how I sustain my living. And we're like, yeah, sorry, you know, nobody gets paid. We can't make exceptions because then everybody wants to start getting paid. So they have a tremendous pull. Nobody has, you know, nobody pays. Nobody pays for helping out. Nobody pays for coming. Nobody pays for this. Nobody pays for that. Nobody pays for anything. So all in all, they've built a pretty amazing system, and then let's see if it can last. I mean, you know, who knows? Anyway, that was a long talk, so maybe we...
Just a very curious, who is kind of setting the agenda, or what is, I mean, the question, I mean, who is, I mean, the founder, we know the founder, but it's not, I mean, who does he have a board? Is it, how is it connected to the public, private, yeah, obviously
so
it's private, but...
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that. Yeah, no, so he, of course, Klaus Schwab, who, by the way, is very shy, finds it very hard to talk to people, you know, can look you in the eye but barely, and is not a very charismatic person at all, has now then, you know, created this, the biggest sort of physical network in the world. And I've met Mark Zuckerberg a few times before he was that famous, and he's also quite shy and not very social and mostly looking down at the ground. I think it's changed, and he's created the other biggest, you know, networking platform in the world, right? So that's sort of an interesting anecdote. These are not social people, right, at all. But Klaus Schwab, so first of all, he's in a one-way and easy position. They call him the only statement in the world without a state.
Exactly.
Right. So he goes around and he meets everybody, right? So first of all, I said he's good at where's the wind blowing. Well, it's maybe not that hard when you sort of meet heads of states and people all the time, and he hears all the time, this is the latest in my industry, this is the latest here, this is the biggest issue coming out, this is what the UN cares most about, this is what the world needs. And he is a very smart person. So a lot comes from him, but then, so him and meeting all these people. And then there's a board, which is quite an impressive board that actually meets physically a few times a year, which has everybody from like the, you know, Indra Nooyi, head of PepsiCo, to Queen Rania, who, by the way, Queen Rania is super smart and very good at what she does. And you know, so there's like 25 people there. So a lot,
both public and private.
Yes,
I mean, it's
a lot of private, but a mix, absolutely. So both public and private, but really, I mean, not all are brilliant, but all are famous. Mm-hmm. Some are brilliant, some are really good thinkers. So from there comes quite a bit as well, because you know, since all these businesses pay, they also want to have a bit of input, so some of the input comes from that. And then there is the internal team. So we came up with a lot of the ideas. I mean, Klaus Schwab wanted to maybe the overview, or he listed all our ideas and all the other ideas, and he's like, I want the title to be this. But then we would come with suggestions. There's entire teams working on just on the agenda. But then now also there are all these, so what they've developed now is something called the Global Agenda Team. So I think they have something like 50 groups of, you know, 50 groups of areas that they specialize in. So it's like from pharmaceutical industry to like the mining industry, but also like poverty reduction, climate change. So 50 groups where there's maybe like 15 people that stay in each group for like 2 to 3 years, and then they rotate, the experts in the world, with 1 or 2 members from the staff working, and they meet every year and are in touch virtually all the time to like what are the main ideas and what are the main things we discuss from here. So there's a constant input, constant input. So all the people working with their experts coming in, the board coming in there, you know, the local team coming in, and then Schwab with all his meetings. And so yeah, it's a big production, and you're not always happy with the results, right? Like I think this is more important, that's more important. But yeah, and then once some sort of program is formed, it's actually sent out to some board members for comments and some top journalists for comments as well, and things like that. But you know, if initiative comes up and everybody's like, well, this is a great thing, we should start something like that. There is a lot of room to start new things there. That's one. It's a hard place to work. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, pretty much. But it's there is a lot of possibilities So I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, absolutely. But, because what I think is interesting is that this is an initiative practically coming from a private person compared to all the rest of the initiatives like all the UN organizations. So I think it's really impressive that this has actually applied and doing it on kind of other premises.
I should say that Klaus Schwab, what he's sort of famous for, he was a professor in economics. Initially he came up with something called the stakeholder theory. That basically you can't do anything in the world without combining different stakeholders. So this whole thing that he was, even though he did more business management for him, he always had a big belief that you need to bring everybody in. So the public sector, the private sector, the civil society. That's at the base of everything, and that's something he developed pretty much as a student. The stakeholder approach. So.
Well, yeah, I think I had a question. It's kind of connected to your question. The strategic partners, what kind of influence do they wield? Can they not decide the agenda, but can they influence the agenda?
Yes. Yeah. So they can definitely, they usually have teams, because it's not always CEO themselves that sit there, but they usually have teams who say, we think this is very important, we really need to discuss this. So they can definitely make suggestions. I mean, as I said, there are 250 official panels at Davos, and there's like 150 strategic partners or something, and then 300 other partners. It's not like, okay, well, here's the idea, we're going to do it. No. They can have input, absolutely, but we can't just have they can't just have a panel just because it's going to make some CEO happy, because basically they want to promote their idea. No. Having said that, I don't know if it's changed now, but because I'm a former journalist, so I get annoyed at a lot of these marketing gigs. Those who are the strategic partners, the top person who comes from there, they usually will be guaranteed a speaker spot on one of the panels, and then you have to suggest various panels to them, and they will often choose one that's interesting or whatever, and some will be very good and actually do something that's challenging. Others will just choose somewhere where they can speak, where they can promote their thing, and then it's really up to the moderator to try and make it somewhat interesting. And getting good moderators is one of the biggest challenges that I have faced in this job ever. It's hard in general to be a good moderator. It's also hard to cut off heads of state in the middle of the sentence who never stop talking, because you can't let them just keep going. They get really pissed off, but the audience gets really pissed off if this person is never going to stop, And so there can be some problems. They're like, I paid $500,000 and I can't even finish my sentence. And yeah, these things happen. And I personally think they went a bit too far in accommodating these people. Like, but this and this CEO is very interested in this, and they're not paying much more. But I think by now there's so many, quote unquote, paying so much that they can no longer just say, okay, if you want to sit there. So, and they also can't be they can be on one panel, one, maybe two. That's sort of part of the thing. And then it's about some of them reining them in, and they can't just get their own way all the time. But they try, of course. Yeah.
I think this is very interesting, but as I understand it, the Davos is one part of the World Economic Forum. Around the year, what happens more? The forum is bigger than the Davos.
Yeah, so
there's some reports coming out. But
yeah, no. So there's first of all all the regional meetings.
Yeah.
So there was a lot. I mean, Davos has 2,500 people. The China meeting also has 2,500 people. Just organizing each one of these meetings is a lot of work. I can tell you that. And then there's the Africa meeting that maybe has 1,500 people. And then there's the Latin America meeting that has, so every month, pretty much, there's a big meeting somewhere in the world with more than 1,000 people. So because there's a lot of work that goes into that, because it's not just doing a program. It's about who is going, what are we doing, how are we going to involve, because it's not the same people going. There may be people a bit of a lower level. And then there's all the, reports coming out, and then there's the working with so the reports, I mean, to do a competitive analysis of all the countries in the world, it's a lot of work. It's like maybe a team of 15 people works on that full time the whole year. But now expanded to doing a few other reports with more staff. And then there's some people working on the global energy initiative. So they work in groups with all the global people. So they also generate reports, not like the same type of reports, but they also generate reports. And what they all do is to try to work with a certain industry to try and promote some sort of change. So all these companies will sign up, for example, for becoming more sustainable companies. And then there's a few people at the WEF working with outside experts during the entire year. So some of the biggest experts in that field in the world. And then together with each of the companies, they're interesting. So they have maybe meetings once or twice a year, just that particular small industry, and then virtual, connections and writing reports and exchanging ideas all the time. So there's like, I don't know how many streams of work are going on at the same time, but hundreds.
What do you do when you release a report? Is there an event connected to that?
There'll be an event with those people. So like, in New York now recently they had a gender parity report that was released. So everybody who is worked on it, like all the companies have been involved and all the experts have been involved, plus anybody who's of interest who's based in New York is invited. So maybe there's 400 people there. They release the report and there's a discussion around it and there's maybe suggestions, and then it's about how much you want to engage or not. And journalists are invited, and as I said, I'm amazed at how often things are quoted. But yeah, for the big things, there's always some sort of launch. And some things are just launched on the website. I mean, if you look at the website, every day there's like a new thing. So considering a staff of 400 or whatever, I'm pretty amazed at how much comes out. But that's also because each staff member is in touch with 20 or 30 experts and, drawing on them all the time. But it's a, I worked a lot when I worked there. So it's no like sitting around like, whatever. No, so I actually think they, you can say it's all, how much, as I said again, how much is actually concretely being done. But in terms of coming up with ideas and suggestions and stuff like that, there is like never-ending amount.
What is you said promoting change is important. The World Economic Forum is of course a forum, a place to meet, and it's also promoting new information to people to act. But how active are you in promoting change?
That's why I say it's hard. You can't force people.
Exactly.
You can't. I mean, so the best thing they do and try to do is like to inform people, and then there are always, for example, some heads of states and CEOs who are very, very into a certain topic, whether it's sustainable cities or sustainable energy, and they will involve them. And I'll see one CEO saying, we decided to go more environmentally friendly, and you know what? It didn't cost us a lot of money. It's been beneficial. So try to get that message out there. You can do the right thing without it costing more, because this is what companies themselves are interested in. But that you can only say you could do this, and this is what this company's done, and they actually think it was worth it, and for them it's worked out. And having the person who represents that company talk about it, because they have all the experts out there talking about you should do this, you should do that. But the company will be a bit like, this expert talking, he doesn't really understand, he doesn't know what it costs, blah blah. But to get the CEO to come, and that they do, he said we did this. And for us, it's worked out really well. And actually, we cut our costs by X%, and we are X% more environmentally friendly. And they also try to do these sort of lists a little bit of like who are the most, resourceful, environmentally friendly. But there's only so much you can do. So yeah, so the critique of like it being a talk shop, yeah, it's true. It's true, definitely true. Yes.
So let's make it real. During your time, what is the most successful or your personal favorite real thing that came out of those?
Well, for me, again, as I said, when my job became to organize, my job became to like bring new thinking, bring new ways of looking at things to Davos. So for me, it became the fact that some people came in there, because you can't follow up on everything, right? Because I had this goal of like 18 out of 20 people in this workshop should go home and do things differently. It doesn't work like that. But for me, it became like the few people that left and actually did something different. So there was one of the big Russian companies that came in, and we did a workshop on, how to set up companies and how to be more environmentally friendly by being better at using resources and stuff. And we worked with environmental experts and let's say designers and architects and seeing how you could, do something differently. And he went home and he started reorganizing, and he brought in and he hired these experts and got them to come and work with him to sort of reorganize a company with 200,000 employees. So yeah, it had an impact. How exactly do you measure that? Hard. I did another thing. That was one of my most fun things I did. When I was a journalist, and even that was when I interviewed people, I asked them, what are one of your biggest challenges? And one of the answers I always got is people don't listen. People don't listen, people don't listen, people don't listen. I've heard that hundreds of times in my working life. Nobody listens. I don't know how much these people themselves listen, but nobody listens. So I was like, okay, so what should I do? And I was trying to think about what can I do about listening. So it's like music, this, that, and then I guess maybe you have heard about the restaurants in the dark, when you eat in the dark. Yeah, so that was started by a social entrepreneur, because the World Economic Forum also has a lot of social entrepreneurs who come, right? They're big into that because Klaus, the founder, and his wife have something called the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurs, which is a private initiative, but sort of part of things where they promote social entrepreneurship. And so it was a social entrepreneur who started this whole idea we can do in the dark. And then I was talking to somebody, I'm like, darkness, darkness, darkness. People like, when you eat in the dark, you taste it more. And I'm like, I wonder. So I just called him up and I said, he's in Germany. This guy, I said, can I come see you? He's like, okay, why do you want to come see me? And I guess come see you and talk. So we came in and I talked to him, and he had started this organization because he had to work with a blind guy at some point in his life. And he thought, thinking, poor blind guy, poor him. And then he realized it wasn't poor him. And then he thought it was really interesting how the blind live their life. And so he created a museum. There's a museum in Frankfurt and in Hamburg. So if you're ever in Hamburg or Frankfurt, go to the blind, the darkness, Dialogue in the Dark is called. Because you go through this whole maze of like you are guided by a blind guide, and you have to sit in a boat, and you have to cross the light, and you hear all the traffic, and it's very disconcerting, and you're sort of out of control, which for many of us is hard. So then I went to him and I said, I really want to do something about listening. Do you think darkness can help? And he's like, of course. So we did this huge thing in the dark in Davos, which I can't even tell you how hard it was to get in there, because it's quite conventional. So I was always known as a problem maker, seeker. It's quite conventional. So it was like, to get people on board, to make this happen, and my boss was like, oh, I don't know, yeah, and then it was like, okay, you can do it, but you're on your own. So there's a huge budget for Davos. Like, you can't, I can't give you any money. If you can make it happen without money, go ahead. And so, of course, I got to know this social entrepreneur really well, because we were on the phone every day. Like, how can we make this happen? What can we do? How can we do it? And find a place in Davos, and not the Congress Center, and, because it has to be pitch dark. Anyway, a lot of work. Managed to make it happen. We were down to like, how do the trucks cross the border, and how much can it weigh, and this is one. I had maybe 75 projects. This is one out of 75. So you're really like, how much time can you spend? But I just thought it was such a cool thing to do. So we did it, having no clue how it was going to go. This is a bit of an extreme example, right? And so we managed to get this space, and we made it totally dark because it can't really be a keyhole. So it took like 5 people 2 days to make this whole thing dark, and we brought like 8 blind guides, and then we shoved people in the dark, and it was so interesting because didn't know how it was going to go, and then we realized, of course, people are very competitive, especially the people who go to Davos, so we have to give them a task to do, so they can get going. And so first they walked around, and then we gave them tasks to do where they had to build stuff in the dark. They couldn't see, and they weren't allowed to touch each other. And to be able to build this thing, you had to listen to others. Because, usually it's like, if I give you like a legal thing and I say, okay, let's build it, you're like, you're going to shove it here and here. But here, you weren't allowed to do that. So for me to understand that you have the biggest piece and I have the smaller piece, and this has to go on top of each other. And you would say, well, I have a piece which is about the size of my finger, but then this one's the size of my hand. So if you're trying to hurry up on your own, you could not do it. You can only do it by doing teamwork. Because I had to hear, how big is your piece? Where do you think it goes? How big is your piece? There was like 6 people around him. How big is your piece? So they all had to work together, and they're all very interested in winning, right? And the only way to win was to listen to each other. So super interesting. And then when they came out of there, we had a session with them, with a psychologist and a philosopher. And it was amazing. People came out and they were like, I've always been told I'm a control freak, and I didn't believe it for a second, and I realized I'm a total control freak. I hated being in the dark. I found it really hard, and wow, and then the next people came out and be like, I thought I was a really good listener, but I realized I wasn't listening at all. I'm surprised how many were admitting all these things. I didn't listen. I actually wasn't listening, and I am listening. So after this, I think some of the companies literally changed their policy on hiring disabled people, because they also realized what it was in the dark to have blind people, because blind people are in their home environment, and they realized how much these blind people, how good they are, what they can handle, and and how they're not like poor blind people like that anymore, right? So that and one of the companies, Allianz, set up a whole training program in their headquarters in Germany in the dark for their employees, and hired a bunch of blind people. Anecdotes. Yeah, so, but like restructuring, so companies restructuring, so the dialogue in darkness became such a success that they went to Africa, Latin America, China. It was all, you know, it became like a big thing that moved around the world and you know, and changed, I think, especially in places like Africa and Asia a little bit, you know, because a little bit of view on disability. I also had I wanted to do something on disability because there are no quote-unquote disabled people in Davos, and I was thinking about how, this is a challenge you always face. You can't force anybody to listen. So how are you going to get people who are not already interested in disability to listen to disability? And I was, you know, again, how do I do this? But the good thing is you always have people to talk to. So I called one of the social entrepreneurs who happens to be blind, and we were brainstorming how do you do something about disability where we don't just get the people who are already converted and care about this. And so we came up with this idea. Well, there's this brilliant British stand-up comedian who is cerebral palsy. She's fantastic, and so we brought her, you know, and she did stand-up comedy there in front of, and I can't tell you the number of people came up and said, "Wow, yeah, you know, when I see somebody disabled, I don't know what to do, and I turn away a little bit, and even in this 1 hour, it sort of changed the view." And then she also was on panels about inclusiveness and blah 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 blah, right? So little things, but again, hard to judge exactly. But you know, a lot of companies that start thinking a little bit differently of how they can do things, or export, or as I said, this Harvard Architecture School experience, you know. So yeah, little things like that. But the darkness thing was a pretty big thing, I think, because quite a few people left there looking differently of who they hired, what their policy was for hiring, and you know, how they engage with other people, and if they were actually listening to what people were saying, you know. But there's loads of examples of companies who come in and you know, change. Mindfulness, I had a big mindfulness thing. This is way before mindfulness came to Sweden. And had the oldest expert in the world, who's also at Harvard and has been working with mindfulness for 35 years, come and do mindfulness, you know, workshops on how that can improve your business, which now everybody's like, oh, improve your business, mindfulness, but this is way before, right? And they started working, various people started working more with her and asked her to come. So a lot of these experts that come, a lot of companies that ask them to come work with their employees and their, you know, their management and things like that.
Anyone else has? I have all these questions. So I'm just wondering, because I mean, we're struggling doing a program when we're looking at the summit as such, the conference, and we are kind of, you know, we're trying to find a red thread. We're trying to put together a program that is really attractive, but not only the usual suspects on stage. That could be, I mean, good speakers, but they are not really giving us what we want. Which is a fight because nobody knows them, so how do we attract people? So we're in constant fight in doing that. When I listen to you, I am a I mean, that's what I do for a living, I do conferences. When I listen to you, it's a dream to do, I mean, you can do things because you have the people there that hopefully will attend at least some of those initiatives you take, because you have that broad field. Has that been do you see that as a problem within the web, that there is I mean, you're approaching a lot of different aspects and subjects and topics in general, or is that
too much? You mean?
Yeah.
No.
Or is that a good thing?
I think again, if it's considering what it is, which is to a large extent a talk shop, and I am fully. By the way, I'm like 51% pro and 49% empty. Yeah? So even if I sound very, I think they do more good than bad, but you could really discuss that, because it's a little global elite, and you know, that reinforce each other. We can go into that whole critique thing. So, but all in all, I think more good than bad. But I think at this point, and because even when we started working there, we also did like, it's a talk shop, we're not getting hat. And most of the people I started working with, we all came with these quite idealistic perspective. We're like, we have to make things happen, and then there was the earthquake in Pakistan, and we're like, we need to form a team, and we need to go work on the field, and we need to be there. But you know, you can't do everything. So no, the web is never going to be like fantastic at like, they try, right, to have work streams that does stuff. But you can't police people, you can't make them do things. So since it is mostly a talk shop, I do think you can include all this. Yeah. If you're not going to be a talk shop, and you can be more like the Clinton Global mission that really wants to match, then differently. But my conclusion would be, if I was Klaus Schwab, you know, and knowing myself how critical I was about like, we don't do anything, we just talk, this is bullshit. I mean, you know, I was a lot like that. You can't, I mean, you can't be everything. So I think this, for them, it's best to stay. But having said about the people, because when I started doing this more creative stuff, I was like, yeah, I'm going to bring the coolest people in here, and I want to find people that not everybody knows already. So I called some of the most brilliant thinkers I've ever met or heard of in my last jobs, and I said, who are the best thinkers in the world? Please, 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 let me know, and can you just introduce me? And that was the most fun part of my job. You know, it was just like, a lot of these people are academics, and a lot of them are based in the US for the very simple reason that US universities have a lot of resources. So, you know, sooner or later, a lot of people end up there because there's more possibilities to expand, to do research, whatever. So they end up there even though they come from all around the world. And you know, I just went to meet, I would go for 3-week trips where I would meet like 5 or 6 meetings every day with just like the coolest thinkers. I mean, amazing. You know, it's a job with like, the rest of the job, you know, but that part was like, wow. And everybody was more or less willing to talk because either they were interested in WEF and Davos, or they were like, we hate it. And I'm like, well, can I come tell you a little bit about it? And I, you know, and it's not all good, but maybe you can have an impact in making it better, right? So that was fantastic. Some of these people very well known, and some not at all. So there I faced that challenge because I bring these fantastic people who weren't maybe well known because they were doing something in a field that, again, they had a problem. Super hard. How do you get people into rooms? This was a big problem. So even there, and it's a bit of a closed club, right? So as soon as you're in Dallas, everybody's like, well, you're here, so you're fine. We're equal. So once you're in, it's like, hey, we're equal, you know. So there's no like, who are you? I mean, there's a bit of hierarchy. I can tell you all about the badge system, which is a thing itself. But basically, to meet somebody that's all like, but to get to a panel. So if I had some fantastic person, but they were known, no, it didn't work for me. So what I started doing then is, because we work quite closely with colleagues, so each colleague was close to whatever industry they were covering. So in one case, for example, one of my who became friends, she was in charge of all the public figures in Europe, and so she was quite close to Blair. And I had this fantastic speaker. I don't remember what it was about anymore. And again, nobody was going to come. And I said, could you convince, this is hard, Blair to come to this? So because basically she had a good relationship with him, so this is how it works, right? Because she had a very good relationship, because usually you can't convince somebody like that. And she's like, I think this would be great for you, and he really trusted her. So he came to that session, and along with him came the refs of the WEF. But the guy himself, no, nobody would come. Even though you sort of know that the topic is like super interesting. But I can tell you during my time there, the most popular sessions, and I'm talking about the official sessions, right, because we're all was the dialogue in the dark thing, because it was so different, so people were ready for that, right? When I first came to the WEF, I had a list of suggestions of people in the economic area that I think they should invite from my previous job, right? Because I had been a business journalist, and they were like, no. And then they came in and said, well, we actually need somebody, maybe we're going to do a marriage counsel thing. And my aunt is a sex therapist. And so I was like, well, I've suggested now 20 people you said no to, and I have no personal relation, but this is my aunt. But she's a sex therapist, and I know she can do it. And they're like, well, we need to see a resume. And she works in the US, and she's quite famous, and she's, whatever. So they looked at the resume, and they're like, fine, she's good enough, right? So that session, you can imagine, sex always sells. I'm amazed, I'm happy they did it. So we had people were literally fighting at the door. I am not kidding, fighting at the door. And I think they were going to allow 80 or 90 people in, and she just said, let everybody who wants to. So the floor was full of people. And I think the title of the session was something like, what was it? Relationships and intimacy. Obviously it wasn't sex per se. And wow, I mean, people got going. It really depends who's in the room, but you think, because there are a lot of well-known, everybody has a badge. So, Tony Blair, UK government, I'm not saying he was there, but that's how it is. And they're sitting in there, and they're like, I didn't have an orgasm, and you're like, oh my gosh, wow. I mean, it was such a popular session, but I think what happened, and again, it's a lot about who is in the room, and I mean on a panel, on the workshop, because she started asking the people there, what do you want to talk about and everything, and I think there were a few women from New York, and in New York, everybody goes to therapy, and everybody's pretty open, free-spoken. So one of these women from New York was like, well, you know, I never liked my mother, and then this happened, and I didn't have orgasms till I was 40, and then blah, blah, blah. So that set the tone, right? So a couple people walked out shocked, and the rest got really going. I mean, it wasn't, because my aunt is very much about it. It's about the relationship, it's about feelings, sex is just a little part of that, but it really got into like multiple orgasms, I don't know what. And here you have all these people with their famous name tags, all getting into like, what about this, what about that, and my mother, my father, and my, you know, like, you're like, oh my God, you know? And then it was so popular they had to repeat, which had never happened before. And then the next session, you know, the people started to ask questions like, well, I'm not sure now what's going to happen. My husband retired, maybe home a bit more, and, you know, how do you think that would go for me? So, you know, so that discussion was not all at the same level. And the other session that was the most attended, which we thought we were going to, because you work with medical people and everything, we're going to do something on depression. And you're always looking for like a fun title, and we're like, well, we can't just say depression because nobody wants to go with their badge. And then finally, like, this particular session was like, there's no good title for this, just forget it. Just the session usually has like a funny, long title. This one had the title Depression, that's it. Second most attended session ever. So you just never really know, you know, and it just goes to show that, yeah, that's obviously a big topic in these areas.
If you were to describe the ideology of the WF, what would that be?
The ideology
of the organization as such?
Their own ideology, like what they try to say?
Even Klaus Schwab's ideology.
Yeah, so private-public partnership to improve, and private-public partnership to make the world a better place. To use public-private and civil society partnerships to make the world a better place. And unfortunately, along with that comes a lot of business arrangements and people making more money and everything. But I think that's the aim and the ideology.
But on financial issues, deregulation rather than big government, or where are we at there? Is he a liberal guy, or where are we at?
I think he's liberal pro-trade, yes, but they try not to take a stance on that. They don't want to be a political organization. They want to be neutral. So they try. I think him personally, definitely pro-trade, pro-globalization, all of that, for sure. But I mean, officially, not a stance on that. And I think now, for example, it's always been like a pro-trade, pro-everything. But I think, like all of us, we realize that, you know, that's not just good. You know, that's created huge divisions between rich and poor, at least in the Western world. And I think that he's very aware of that. And how much he personally cares, I don't know. But does he talk about it? Absolutely. Like, we need to do this. It can't only be for the rich, you know. It cannot only be for the rich. But the people who come to Davos, do they care? Some, most of them, probably not. Do they come just for business? Absolutely. For sure, for sure. And well, true criticism. Absolutely. It's, can't get away from that. A lot of people just go to make more business and make more money. And you can just hope that some of them get better ideas to do more. But I think, I mean, Klaus Schwab, I mean, there's always a discussion about how much money has he made, and because this is a not-for-profit, and it's all like in a Swiss, holding that nobody has insight to, so nobody knows how much money is there or anything. All I can say for him, and I'm not a big fan of his in generally, is that he has lived in the same house since 1971. He's never, unless he has a reason to, he will never fly a private jet. When, you know, he gets offers to have nicer cars, he has an Audi, and that's fine. And when they say, well, you get 5 big hotel rooms now for your disposition, he's like, really? I only need 1. So there is an element of like, let's keep it, like, we're doing quite well, I'm happy the way I am, I don't need 10 more of this, or 10 bigger houses, or 10 bigger that. Not that he's not living a good life, but there's at least an element of like, let's be somewhat, you know, fair. I'm sure he's made loads of money, but nobody knows, right? But I don't think it's the driving force. I really don't.
How much does it influence the agenda of the program, for example, free trade? Or could there be criticism to free trade?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. No, if you have a panel, you want to make it somewhat interesting, so you will always have one person on there who's against it. You know, yeah, you don't want to just have a. I mean, again, Davos has been criticized, right? They call it the Davos man. That was a term that was coined, I think, in 2004 or something. And the Davos man is like this liberal, free trade, without a nation, because it's all like international, non-nation state, people who just float around, the global elite of the 1%. yes, it's true. That's who it is. And you know, whatever works for them is obviously what they're going to try to promote a little bit. You know, this is what works for us. And to be honest, I mean, I might have changed, but I think, you know, I'm not one of those global elites. But even as a, like, I don't know, somebody who's studied economics and lived in various countries in the world, at least until a few years ago, I was also very much like pro-trade. Why do we need all these nation barriers? Why can't we just have a look at the global world? Can't we also work together? You know, I'm one of them, I guess, in that way. Right now, I can see the problems with that. But it's for me, it's not that global elite thinking, which I'm definitely not a billionaire with a private plane and all that. But I could relate to that. I'm like, yeah, we're one big world. What's this whole, like, you know, dividing here and not trading and being protectionist? I don't like that. So, yeah, but it's the pros and cons of that, you know.
Just wondering with the having organizations or secretariats, whatever, in different countries now, and they're opening in San Francisco. Is that handled by, I mean, is there corporations with other organizations that are running things in those other countries, or are WEF having their own staff in those countries?
So the San Francisco office, from what I understand, is actually going to be totally sponsored by companies in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. So they're financing that whole thing. And I'm not sure who's going to pay the staff. The building, the rooms, is all paid for by companies. And the staff, I'm not sure. The other offices are actually all paid for by WEF. Rented by WEF, paid for by WEF. So New York, when they opened in New York, which now has like 60 or 70 people, it was a big thing because if it was going to open as an affiliate to the World Economic Forum, they would have to disclose all their financials. And they didn't want to do that. So it was started, and that's when people also like, Klaus, well, come on, you know, like, what the hell, you know? It was going to disclose the top salaries and the top this and the top that. They didn't want. So they started as a separate World Economic Forum Inc. entity as to not disclose what they had to, because they want to keep that. And I think China and Japan are small offices, 20 people, maybe 10, maybe 5, 10 in Japan and 20. That's New York is all financed by WEF. I think the others, it might be that they got space for 10 people somewhere, but the salaries and everything is paid for by the staff because they don't want to be that dependent. I mean, they can take a lot of, you know, people putting in free stuff and maybe a building, but not, you know, not paid staff because you want to try to stay somewhat independent, right? I mean, all the reports that they try to be independent. They're not influenced by like, well, this company is gonna, you know, it's like, it's not like the, you know, whatever Google report. It's actually WEF report.
What would you say, I mean, this is the second year we do this summit. We are trying to build this day-to-day work with our newsletters, and I mean, we are looking obviously into the WEF and how, I mean, with the articles and the reports, and hope to, I mean, at least have some kind of similarity then. But what would you say, what would your advice to us be to trying to do this in this? And we are saying, I've got to say that, we have this idea of being the prototype, prototype place in the Öresund region to solve things like with the life science and material science. That's what we're trying to sell as well, so to say. That's why we are geographically in this region. So what would you say, what should we think about trying to?
I think it's a hard one, but first of all, I think it's a great idea because from what I understand, just trying to spend a little time down here, there's so much going on here, especially in life sciences and even with the universities and Lund and the companies. So and from what I understand, there is not as much interaction as there should be. That's from my understanding. So I think it's a great idea. I just think the risk from what I see is that you end up with working with all the experts who maybe really do something for free and everything, and it's hard to get companies on board and you just don't know how to financially sustain yourselves. I think this is a big problem. So I think it's like, how do you get these companies to want to pay for your services? I think that's the main thing. If somebody's willing to pay, the rest you can do. And personally I hate this because I like the thinking part. That's my job. You know, my job is always like the content. Mm-hmm. And I hate the money side of it, you know. But I think that, you know, there's so many good ideas, but without the buy-in from the people with the finance thing, you can't work for free the rest of your life, right? I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So I don't know if you could come up with some great concepts together with whatever experts that are willing to sit down with you and somehow have companies be willing to pay and somehow try to engage them, not just in a one-off, come to conference once, but have them sign up for 3 years. Or have do a 3-year program with them so your finances are okay for 2-3 years so you can actually focus on what you're doing. Because I think that it's like the constant, and it's like the I don't know, the many things, but the WEF organization, I think companies have to sign up for 3 years or 5 years or something. So to get that engagement so you're not constantly struggling financially, however sad that is, right? But if you can come up with maybe a concept together with, this is what we're going to do, 2 issues we were talking about. This is one way to do this, this is one way to do this, we have one something that the companies can't say no to, that say there's too much value for us here to say no to that. And then not just have it pay once to come to something, but have an engagement where you sort of sit down and, maybe you have a plan. This is the 2-year plan, and we're going to work with all these experts, and they're willing to sit down with us for 2 years, and we want you on board, but you have to sign up for 2 years. And of course it's going to get hard to sign them up for 2 years. I'm just brainstorming, but I would say something like that, because you don't want to come 1 hour and then disappear, and you are back to square one. 1 hour disappear, back to square one. So, and I think that keeps the WEF going to some extent as well, because all these people are, even though the CEO comes to the Davos, all these people are engaged. They are there, and they're working with them, and they're working together with stuff that it's in their interest to have access to these experts, or whatever it is, It's in their interest to get out and have this in the media. So something that's, I can brainstorm more about it, but just one-off. I think that's what they do so well, right? They don't let them go, they engage them for a few years, and the people who are willing to pay feel like they're missing out if they're not paying, if they're not there, so they do pay. That, you have to make them realize that you're really missing out if you're not here, and we engage you for, we can seriously change something, and it will not hurt your bottom line either. And it will help you be seen as a whatever. Even companies love this, right? When I used to work at Fortune, we did this best companies to work for and most diverse companies to work for, and it's horrible putting together these lists. Company died for being on that. Company died. They were all over there. I want to be on this. I want the best companies to work for. I want to be best. I want to be best, and I want to be on the top there. And because that's going to make me so attractive and get a good reputation, and then they're going to get all the good employees to come and we can market that. They go crazy for this. I can't tell you how into this. So if there's something also, you can have a little label, I'm sure there's so much of that now, but the most involved, the greenest, the best, the most, something that they can promote in the sense of we're actually doing something about this and we're working with this. They go crazy for that. So
a good suggestion.
Something along those lines. What else can I say? So no, the parties in Davos are great. Parties are great. People go nuts, and people get drunk, and it can be a bit embarrassing, but that's when you hear a lot of the things, and some, funny, anecdotes. I don't know if this is true because it never happened during my time, but there are a lot of stories, the Russians, a couple of years, rented huge chalets and flew in these high-end prostitutes, and then they, they had all their business meetings in these beautiful chalets with these supposedly high-end prostitutes. You hear stories like that all the time, and I'm sure it's true. I personally, did I see it? No. Did most of my colleagues see it? Absolutely not. Does it happen? Of course. And I forgot to say that all the people who come there, you cannot, so everybody would love to come with their assistant, somebody thinks. No, you cannot. You can only come, even if you're head of state, you come with your delegation. So then you can bring your people. You have to, right? But other than that, then we're talking about 100 people out of 2,500. Other than that, everybody comes and you just have to deal with the security that's there. You can't bring your own bodyguard and your own this, So when Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie are there, you're like, hey, how are you? You can actually talk to them. It's a bit embarrassing because everybody's like this. Emma Thompson was one of my guests one year. She was fantastic. People were jumping all over her, and she stayed so cool. She never even got a bite to eat because people were all over her. They bring a few celebrities, but not too many. They don't want too many, and they only bring celebrities that are working on a cause. So last year was Leonardo DiCaprio for environmental issues. Then it was Matt Damon, who works a lot on water. But they don't want too much because that was a celebrity place. So they bring a few here that actually, and only people who actually are really into their cause. Like Leonardo DiCaprio is really into his cause. Matt Damon is really into his cause. But people are so anyway. The security, right? Yeah, everybody's just, and you can only bring your spouse. So everybody who comes can bring their spouse, right? So some people have new spouses every year, which is so interesting. Which are obviously not new spouses, but and you sort of wonder, you really going to take your lover here when you're like in front of all these people? But they do. And 1 year, and you know, there's a book of bios, and it says your bio, and then it says your spouse's name. And I remember 1 year I was there, they had, because he had changed spouses, so they had published by mistake the name of his mistress instead of his wife. And so the night before Davos started, and there are 3,000 programs, the whole staff was sitting ripping out that page, you know, because you just didn't want the name of the mistress published in the bio book. So these are little anecdotes that, you know, that sort of
You should write a book about this.
I'm sure there's another, and that's another thing I was going to say, because when I first started working there, it's a hard place to work, and I was so disillusioned, and I was like, okay, I need to find out, because it's not a nice, there's a lot of fantastic people working there, very smart, driven, and people who want to do something good about the world. That's a nice thing. I'm not saying it doesn't always work out. When most people start working there, they really believe we want to do something better in this world, and then people get, and I was like, I need to find out, because this is a crazy organization. So I asked all my journalist friends, can you do some, research on this, because, you need to have access to different databases, and I want to find out what other shit about this. There was very little, because that's the other thing that the WEF is very smart about. They have the media in their pockets, because everybody wants to come to Davos. Now, I'm not saying people never write a critical article, they do, but most of the time you write a critical article, you don't get re-invited, and it's still pretty cool to be in there because you meet so many people. So they have everybody in there, but the media is right there in their pockets, you know. Of course, there's some critique, but so, yeah, and I think that's, the media quotes the WEF, it's quoted a lot, blah, 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 the people get invited back, so, yeah, you can be a bit cynical about that as well, right? But it's a very good strategy. The media is dying to come, and the media writes positive things, and the more reports come out, and the more they distribute it to all, I'm not saying all the journalists who quote the WEF have been there and want to be there, because these are, reports that are done by neutral people. But yeah, of course, it's like, great. Now we have the media, we have this, we have that, we have everybody in our pocket. So it's a bit special.
Okay, so time is running out. Well, I think this was really interesting. I got so many ideas. I don't know if it's good or bad for the project, actually. But I think we have a lot to learn. I mean, good and bad, I think. So thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. I feel like I was a bit more monologue than I had.
No, don't worry about it. If anyone wants some extra sandwich, go ahead if you're more hungry. And